Hello, this is Warlord, and what we're going to do is work with height map driven terrains. I got a lot of inquiries about that since my iClone 7 first scene tutorial with landscapes. And we're going to use Photoshop. You can use your own photo editor. We're going to go in and look at the two maps that drive that terrain, and we're going to work with them and change them. I know in the manual it says that you need to use Earth Sculptor and do some other things, but I think you'll be surprised at what we can do. So let's go ahead and get started. Let's go to Height Map Terrain within the Terrain folder, and let's grab Butte and drag it in. Now I'm just going to come way out so we can see what we're doing here. Let's go to Scene, Terrain, select Butte. And for those of you that don't know, you can of course change just the height right here by doing that. And you can also smooth it out, which we'll use. What we're going to use is the height map and the mask. And we're going to concentrate first on the height map. And what we're going to want to do is flatten it out. So let's go ahead and dump it into Photoshop. And then I'm going to put a layer on top of it because I like to keep the original layer as my palette. So I can come in like this and grab a color. I'm going to grab this kind of a mid-color gray. And on the new layer, I'm just going to fill it. And what that's going to do, on a file, I'm going to show you as we go along. This might be a little slower this way, but you can follow along and see what's happening. I'll show you what it did. It flattened the terrain out. Now what I'm going to do is put a lake over on this side with kind of a stream going to it. So I usually add a new layer, just so it makes it easier for me to change things. Let's get it a little wider. And now, I don't need to look at this palette. What I need to do, since I'm going to go lower, is I need to go to a black. And I'm going to go down to just regular black. And this is going to be a lot deeper than you probably normally need. But this way you can see what I'm doing. And I'm just going to kind of draw a meandering river. And then come in and kind of fix a lake. Not a part of it. Nothing fancy. Now let's save as. Save it. And let's go take a look at what we've got. And you'll notice here we have our lake. Now you'll see there that, yeah, it's got some rough edges, but not only can we use our height, we can smooth it out like I showed you earlier. So we'll go ahead and just leave it like that for now. But here, you can see the lake that we just drew off with the water coming in and out. Now don't worry about the textures. We're going to take care of that later. Just ignore those. Let's say that we want an island in this. So let's go back over here. I'm going to add another layer. And for the island, I want it to basically be, I kind of want it to be the same height here as the land. So I'm just going to grab that color. And we'll just kind of draw us an island. And your island can be any way you want to shape it. I was using a pen there the first time, and it had triggered the sensitivity, so it wouldn't really draw on the island. I'm using the mouse right now. And we'll bring a little bit down this way. Okay, now File. And now there's our island. And let's go back and let's put a land bridge in this. Make it a little smaller. Now we could have done this on a different layer, but I'm just going to do it on the same layer. And this ought to tie that together. And it's a little stiff, but we'll smooth it out with our smooth right here. But as you can see, what we've got now is we've got our lake, an island, and a little land bridge connecting to it. Now, let's go in and roll up these edges a little bit so they won't just be quite so flat. I'll add a new layer. Let me shut that one off. Come over here and grab. I don't think I quite want it that tall. That's the tallest. I don't want it that low, so I'll just come up a little bit. Turn that back on. Make sure you're on your proper layer. And we're just kind of going around the edges a little here. And if you want this to be solid all the way around, you of course would cover up those intake and outtake to the lake. And you probably also want to take some time to make this a little more rougher than just running around like I am. You might want to just come in and rough it up a little. You don't exactly want straight lines. Let's see what that does. Okay, yeah, that. Roll the edges up. Depending on your camera shot, you may not want it quite that abrupt. And of course, you could come in there with a gradient and get a gradual rise. But that'll just keep you from having a sharp edge. Now we also probably ought to break up just a little bit of this area right over here before we get to our textures. And we can do that with a different brush. Let's go ahead and add a new layer. And instead of just using the round brush, let's grab this maple leaf brush. Some of us are pretty familiar with maple leaf. And let's see. For height, let's turn this off, get to our palette. This is the highest, this is the lowest out, except for the lake bottom. Let's grab something in here. Or maybe right here, a little higher. And make sure you're on your proper layer. And we're just going to sprinkle this around a little. And let's see if this did anything at all like we wanted it to. It may not have. It's probably going to be a pretty sharp edge, but remember, we can go in there and smooth it later. Now, those are some pretty abrupt shapes, so let's see what it looks like after we smooth it. Oh yeah, that'll work. Once we smooth them down. So you can see here how we can come in and just add things with just some clicks. And it really doesn't matter what the brush actually is. It still works for us. Now, let's go to the mask and do our textures. Now we know that this lake bottom is not going to be that color. It's going to be like a lighter color or a different color. And we need first really just to get an overall green. So let's go over here to texture. And on height map 1, diffuse, let's save these maps out. We're just going to save them. I'm just going to call them simple things like G1, mainly because I'm using a drawing monitor, and I don't want y'all to have to sit there and wait on me to one-hand these things. So I'll just make unique names. And also we're going to delete them as we go, so you can see how they work with all this. So just bear with me while I do this. And we'll gradually get it done. Just saving and deleting. That's so we can reuse it. So we'll all kind of be on the same page, have the same textures. Now this texture we don't need, but I'm going to go ahead and just save it out anyway. Just in case we change our mind. Okay. Now, the overall controlling map that I've found out is map number 4 as far as the entire surface goes. So we'll go ahead and we'll put that on there right now. And let's go get the bump map. And let's get our bump moved up there. Now, I also think they've got it tiled a bit too much. Even though this is way up here, you wouldn't even be able to see a character from this distance. So don't let the scale throw you here. We're way up above anything that we'd ever see. I'm going to take this down, lock the ratio, and take this down to 5. And you can already see we're getting a totally different texture there. Let's go to about 20. And we may end up changing that later. When you're using it up close, of course, it doesn't look that repetitive. Now, another thing, too, you'll see it's a light green. You need to come back and always make sure that you click on Use RGB if you want it to be darker. Okay, let's go back and get our mask, and let's launch it in our photo editor, and let's do the same thing. Let's put a layer over the top so that we can preserve that. I'm going to start the same way by coming and grabbing that black, and I'm going to fill that new layer with that black. And now let's go see what this does. And there we have it on the solid color. Now let's go back and let's work on changing this here. Changing just the lake bottom and the sides. And we're going to need a guide to do that with. We need this as a guide. So what I'm going to do is come over here to Layer, Flatten Image, select all, Control-C to copy, Control-V to paste, and then I'm going to come back to this other map, and basically what you can do is come over here and undo the flatten. And that way we've restored that back if we need to make any changes. And now I have it over here as a guide. And I use red, green, blue. So I'm not sure what you're supposed to use it. But let's go ahead and let's start off with red. And let's add a new layer here. Go get our brush. And I guess I better get a proper brush. That's a little bit big. And now let's just, you kind of want to cover a little bit of the outside too, kind of like sand comes up. Oops, that was totally way too much. I mainly want to just cover the black, the dark area at the bottom of the lake. But you know that water washes up on the edge, and of course nothing grows underwater, so that's why you have sand, rocks, and things like that. So I'm kind of letting it bleed over the edge. Maybe a little too much in some cases. but we'll see. We're eventually going to want to make all that solid in there. Do the same thing around the island. And when you don't have it just perfect, that's going to be kind of like rises and lowers. If you were doing this on a height map, that's how you would get a different shape bottom, a rise and lower in the bottom. Here it doesn't really matter because it's just what it would be is intensity. Now when you export this map out, make sure you turn off your guide. Now let's go see what this has done, see if it's anywhere close to what we want. Sure is. So, and that's mainly because we use the guide to do it. Let's come over here to our textures. We use red, that's usually number 1. And let's see, that's the bottom. Let's use this one right here. And it's R1 and RB1. And then let's go, don't forget to click RGB. Let's go down here and let's change this to about 10. Hope I don't need that kind of 10. Well, actually that didn't look too bad. That's a little rough there. You know, I might just go back to that other because it looked kind of like sand, even though that was a misprint. We'll just leave it like that. And that'll be the sand underneath us. We'll go in there and increase that also. Okay, so now we've got the lake bottom. Of course, that could be any color you wanted to make it. Now let's say that we need to add some roads. Okay, let's go back over to Photoshop. That was red, green, blue. I'm not even sure if that's what it's supposed to be. It just works for me. You notice I'm not even that particular on the red, green, blue. I try not to get too light. Now let's draw us out some roads. And let's use the guide so that we know where we're going to be drawing the roads, so we won't draw them over the top of a mountain or something where it would look funny. And just kind of draw a series of random roads like that. Don't forget to turn that off. And one thing about it, these roads, we're looking at this real tall. These roads may be too wide even at this size. Because remember, we're looking at this from way above. Let's go ahead and file. Save as. Okay, and there's our roads. And it should be this one right here. And let's use these two for the road. And we'll come down here and change it a bit. Now, another thing to remember too, if you don't have, this is a great thing about this new little adjust color. Let's say you don't have a bump. It may not work exactly the same, but you put the same image in it. Pull up your adjust color and desaturate it. And make it, and sometimes you may want to brighten it or darken it a little. And make it into your own bump map. And then boost it up. And that way, as long as you have a color copy of it, they've now helped you to have a bump map. So as you can see here, we've got quite a bit done, just like this. Now let's say we want to break up these little hills a little bit over here. Let's go back over Photoshop, turn on our map so we see where the hills are exactly. And see red, green, blue. We'll get a blue this time. And I'm going to increase this where I can see a little better. Take the size down a little more. And I'm just going to, of course, add a new layer. I'm just going to kind of come along here and change this. Because I really don't, I'm just kind of guessing this is what it's going to look like. It's really been a while since I've done something like this. I would think this would be how you would turn it into rocks or make it snow-capped mountains or something like this. In fact, just to make sure what we're doing here, let's just leave it like that, not do all of them so we can have a comparison. And shut off our reference map. Go through our routine. Let's see where this put these. That's basically where I wanted it. We could go back and expand on that a little more if we wanted to. We could leave that as white, or we can come in as rock. And that just kind of breaks up the top of those. Cut this in half. You might not want to make those so straight line and abrupt, but you get the idea now as to how this works. All you have to do now is add sky, water, trees, and grass. If you haven't ever worked with trees and grass, then refer to my your first scene with iClone 7 landscaping video, and it'll show you how to do this. But this shows you that this really is a powerful tool with a height map, a lot more powerful than you probably thought it was. You can make a lot of different terrains out of this with just a little bit of imagination and your favorite photo editor. I hope this helps.